Hey, what's up? Chris Jr. here for Kriscoart. Welcome to this very basic introduction to Premiere Pro. Now, I'm making this video as sort of a refresh and an update to an older video I did a while back on an older version of Premiere, which you guys seem to love, and it got a lot of you started in Premiere Pro. So I'm doing just a newer version, which kind of covers the same things and basic concepts, but at least the UI and everything else matches with the brand new Premiere that you're probably using right now. Now, I know you're thinking this video is not 20 minutes long, but don't worry, the tutorial portion of this is 20 minutes and we're gonna jump right into it right now. So let's start the clock. We have 20 minutes and we're gonna learn Premiere Pro. So before getting started, be organized, create your own folder for the project with the footage and the sound and every other element that you need, and that's gonna save you a lot of headache in the end. So we have our footage and our sound. So let's fire up Premiere Pro. Once Premiere opens up, it presents you with this screen over here, and in here you can find all your most recent projects, and of course, if this is your first time using Premiere, you won't have any, and then you can create a new project, open a project, and all that good stuff. So we're gonna create a new project. We wanna place it in this folder, so we're gonna name our project tutorial example or whatever, and then the location for it, we're going to go under browse, and we're going to find that folder. So it's under desktop in my case, and in here we're going to double click to select it, and we're going to click OK. And as you can see, if I bring up Finder again, it created a project file in that folder, which is what we're looking at now, which is a lot. It's daunting. I know it can be a little overwhelming, but don't worry. We're going to take it one step at a time, and we're going to discover what each of these panels does, and we'll take it from there. So to get started, as Premiere is telling us, we need to import some media in order to start. So we can double click in this section, or we can go under File and Import. And in here, I can select the folder that I want, such as footage or sound. For now, we're just going to worry about the footage. And in here, I can select the individual clips that I want, or I can select multiple ones by hitting Command on my computer if I'm on Mac, or Control for PC. You can select individual clips like that, or of course, you can do the usual Shift and select multiple ones. I'm going to select the entire folder, and I'm going to click on Import. So Premiere is going to import those files, and it's going to place them right here in our project panel. So right now it created a folder, which in Premiere Pro's language, it's called a bin. So if I double click on this bin, it's going to open up this window, which contains all of my clips, all of my footage. And we can move this around. We can actually see a thumbnail and preview it. And the nice thing about this is that if I hover over with my cursor, you can actually preview what the clip looks like. So the entirety of the clip, if I just scroll right above it. Now the next step is, let's say, finding a clip that we want to start importing. So you can do a few things. From here, you can of course just grab the clips and drag them onto your timeline panel over here, or you can double click on them, and this opens them up into your source monitor that appears right here. Now keep in mind that whenever I'm talking about these things, this is just a default view of panels, but all of these, as you can see, are movable, and not just like this, but I can actually separate them out and drag them wherever else I want. So keep in mind that this interface is completely modular, and eventually once you get familiar with it, you can actually customize it to fit your needs better. So for now, this should look pretty similar to yours, and keep in mind that if it doesn't, go under Window, Workspaces, and make sure that you are following along with my same workspace, which by the way, you can access up here as well. So okay, so now we have kind of a bigger way of previewing our clip. This isn't in our timeline. We're not working with this yet. We're just taking a look at it in the source monitor. So let's say maybe I want to use this clip because it has a little bit of this introduction, which is kind of nice. So we can play this through. Okay, not bad. Let's say we're happy with this and we want to import this and start cutting and adding other clips. So I'm going to go in the beginning here. I like the very beginning of this. So I'm going to hit I on my keyboard. And this is going to set an in point. By the way, you can do the same exact thing with this button right here. It says mark in, and then you can see the shortcut for that is I. And then we can scroll to a point where we want maybe a cut to happen. And I kind of want to see the action of her lifting her hand, and then we cut to a close-up of that. So I'm going to just end it roughly about here. I'm going to hit O on my keyboard. Of course, you can do the same thing by clicking on this button to mark the out point. And then from here, we can do a couple of things. Now, we don't have a sequence created yet, and a sequence is essentially what's going to contain your timeline and all of the edits that you're doing. Now, you can either create a new sequence by going under File, New, Sequence, but I'm going to show you just a little bit of a quicker way of doing this. So if I click on this video and I drag it onto my timeline panel and I let go, it's going to create a sequence from that. But the nice thing about creating a sequence this way is that all of the settings of the sequence will match the clip that you've imported. Now let me tell you why this is important, because if you go under File and you go under New and Sequence, you see that you have a bunch of settings. You can go under settings themselves here. You can see the frame size as well as the frame rate. And these are all things that are very important to know ahead of time when you're editing. These are all things that you need to keep in mind, but the nice thing about it is that if you're conforming to footage, you can just drag and drop the footage as I just showed you, and it's going to create a sequence that matches those settings exactly. So there we go. Now we have this bit of clip that introduces our subject. Now I want to cut to a close-up. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to reopen up this footage bin, and I'm going to go and move on to the next shot. So I'm going to preview this one, because I think this is a good take. Take a look at it. We have the hand motion, so she's kind of playing with the shadow a bit. And there we go. That's a pretty good moment. So I'm going to go into the beginning here, set an in point, sorry, and then go to the out and set an out point. And this is all very rough. I'm not making my edit yet. This is what's going to happen in the sequence here in my timeline. For now, I'm just grabbing the range, the sections out of the clips that I'm most interested in. Now, one other thing that I want to mention when you're dragging and dropping things into your timeline from your source monitor in this way is that you can of course drag the entire thing. You can see that the cursor changes into a little tiny hand as I click and I drag this in. But you can see that as I'm dragging this, we're dragging these two sort of rectangles. And one is the video track and one is the audio track that is contained in this footage. So I'm going to hit Command Z on my keyboard. And I'm going to show you these two little buttons right here. And as you can see, the text pop-up says drag video only or drag audio only. And let me show you what this does. If I drag the video only, you see there's no audio down here. But in my video tracks up here, I now only have one square because I'm only dragging in the video portion of this clip. And from that, you can see now that our timeline panel is actually really divided vertically into two halves. So one is for video. So you see here we have V1, that's for video track 1, video track 2, video track 3. And then you have on the bottom audio tracks as well. A couple other things worth noting in here while we're at it is that I can actually turn off certain video tracks. So for example, if I were to stack this one on top, now we're looking at this clip and we can't see the clip underneath it because this clip is blocking it. So I can temporarily turn this off by toggling this icon, this eye icon. And you can see that now we're hiding this clip. So the clip of the hand, we're hiding it so we can see what's underneath it because it's revealing this other clip. And of course we can hide this as well. And now we have nothing because we have nothing else in our timeline. Now, similar to with video, you can do the same thing with audio. So you can actually mute certain tracks as well as soloing an individual track. And this is so helpful whenever you're obviously starting to stack a lot more than just these three elements here. When you have a sound design timeline and a bunch of stuff, and you really want to dial in your attention to one specific sound, you can just isolate that for a moment, add some effects, do whatever adjustments, and then come back to the overall project. So I'm going to select this top clip and hit delete because I want to bring in both audio and video. And you can see how it snaps nicely there. I'm going to let go, and now we have two clips into our timeline. If I hit play, we see that we have our first cut made. Now it's quite jittery. It's very slow, and that's because I'm on a laptop right now. And I know most of us are running machines that are not, NASA computers. So if you want to lower your resolution, sometimes it's going to be on full, and that might be a little bit too much to handle for your working machine. So go ahead and click on this and put it to half, quarter, or an eighth. And that's just going to drop the resolution just for whenever you're editing and you're previewing your timeline. And by the way, this is our program monitor. So this is essentially going to show us what's in our sequence. So this is pretty much our edit. So whatever adjustments, whatever cuts we're making here and we're playing through, we're going to be seeing in our program monitor, versus the source monitor is just for individual clips, individual elements that you're previewing and that you're bringing into your main timeline. So let's move along and let's bring in our third and final clip. I'm going to double click on this and I want to see the moment where her hand, or maybe a little bit before, So we see her face and then the hand comes down. So I'm gonna set an in point, hit play, hand goes down, hit O on the keyboard. Now we have our selection made, and again, I'm gonna drag and drop this in our timeline. So there we go. We have our completed sequence in terms of the moments that we need to make this edit. By the way, I'm zooming in with the plus button on my keyboard, but I wanna go to this end moment over here because we see the hand kind of going up and then it dips down when we're really seeing another different type of motion here, and it's a little jarring. So what I wanna do is I wanna cut this clip just as the hand goes up. So right before it goes down, right here. Now there's a couple ways of doing this. What I can do is I can grab this clip, the ends of it, and drag them in, and that's gonna make that cut, or I'm gonna hit Command Z to undo that. I can hit C on my keyboard, and this is gonna bring up the razor tool. Now the razor tool essentially just cuts things. So whenever you go over, you can see how there's like a line that's appearing. I can go over my timeline indicator, exactly where I want the cut to happen. I can click on it, and it's gonna create a cut. So now I have that same clip split into two parts. Now we don't need the second part, so I'm gonna hit delete on that. And now to remove this gap, you can either drag this back, or you can select the empty space in between them and hit delete. And what that did was essentially a ripple delete, where you're deleting space or gaps, and it's bringing everything that is beyond that closer so that that gap is filled. So now let's take a look at that moment again. Hand goes up, it works a lot better. And then it's going down a little bit too soon here. So I'm gonna cut it right here. And the nice thing about this is I'm just gonna grab this clip and push it back. And that is automatically gonna overlap on the other clip, delete whatever was there. And yeah, just as you saw, we went from here, we just pushed it back. It snaps onto my timeline indicator, and we've made a cut that way. So I just want to show you these different ways of doing it so that you know that you're not stuck to just, pulling things in or out, or, using the razor tool to create cuts. You can really play around with these elements as if they were puzzle pieces. And honestly, Premiere Pro is pretty intuitive when it comes to that, because you can move these around in a way that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now let's say that we are happy with that. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna show you just a few little tricks in the beginning here. Let's say we wanna add a fade up. I'm gonna select the beginning portion of this clip just by clicking right at the edge here. And I'm gonna hit Command D on my keyboard, or Control D. And this is just gonna apply a default transition, which is a cross dissolve. And it's gonna go from black because we have nothing else before it. And it's gonna fade into our scene. If you wanna apply transitions or effects, that's where the effects panel comes in. So you can of course look for a cross dissolve there. And there we go. I can drag and drop this to dissolve these two clips. So now we have a dissolve. I can drag and drop it at the end of a clip so that now we have a fade to black because we have nothing else beyond this point. So we can see that. There we go, fades to black. I can select the transition or the clip, but see, let me go back to the transition. I can select that and delete that so that now we remove that crossfade. And essentially everything else kind of works the same. So let's say we want to add some brightness and contrast. And these are all effects that you can type in here. Click, drag it onto your video. And now to make adjustments for that, that's where the effects controls panel comes in. So you click on that, and now you have a bunch of new information here, but don't worry, it's not as daunting as it looks like. You can see that we found our effect down here, and we can literally just drag this up to increase the brightness, drag it down. We can click on it, type in whatever value we want. There we go. You can click on this effects icon to temporarily shut it off, just to see what it looked like before maybe, then turn it back on. You can see what it looks like after. Then you can also delete the effect by selecting it and hitting delete. So while we're here, let me just show you a couple of things that you can do under the motion section under the effects controls panel. So the motion is specifically for this clip that we have selected. So I think what's really cool sometimes is to add a little bit of a post camera move. So what we can do here is maybe add a subtle zoom into the scene so we can really focus in our audience's attention a little bit more into what's happening here. So I'm going to go to the beginning here, and I'm going to click on the stopwatch for the position parameter and on the stopwatch for the scale parameter. Now, if you used After Effects before, you're familiar with what that does. That essentially creates keyframes, which are hard to see here. Let me just drag one out. A keyframe is a diamond shaped thing that at a certain point in time is telling Premiere, hey, keep track of what value it is here, and then you can add other keyframes and you can create animations that way. And as you saw, you can click and drag these keyframes around. So I'm just going to place it right back at the beginning where it was, and I'm going to go to the end here, and I'm going to scale this up, and I'm going to push this down. So this is the horizontal, this is the vertical, all in pixels, and this is the scale. So there's a little bit of black, so that means I went too far. So I'm gonna just push this down just a little bit. And now I can zoom out here so we see our whole thing here. And we see that we have some in keyframes and some out keyframes. And what that did is, if I now go to the beginning and I play it, it adds this very subtle zoom in. And that makes this opening shot a little bit more engaging. And I'm just showing you this as an example. Of course, you can use this in whatever way you want. You can even do that for the rotation. But just keep in mind that these are all options that whenever you see a stopwatch, that means you can add keyframes and in turn animate that specific parameter. So before jumping into the final step of color grading this, let's just add a few sound effects just to make this scene feel a little bit more cinematic and polished. So I'm gonna go under Finder, and in here, I'm just gonna look for some sounds, maybe some cloth rustling, and I can also import things by dragging and dropping them into my project bin. Maybe add some city ambience in there, and let's just call that good for now. So what I can do here is I can, of course, double click on these elements to open them up in my source monitor. So that works as well for audio and anything else. And here we have, a waveform, which is always nice. And we can set some in and out points in here as well in the same exact kind of way. And then you can see that the video button for this is disabled because this is not a video. And we can drag in just the audio and drag and drop it onto one of the audio tracks in here. Then I'm going to go to the point in time where we want to hear a little bit of this cloth rustling. And I can just add this effect as well. I don't have to drag it from the source monitor necessarily. I can also grab and drop this in from my project bin. Now, one thing about this sound is that it's way too long. I only want to hear it once the hand comes down. So what we can do is we can adjust the volume of this by double clicking in this area of the audio track. If I double click here, it's going to expand this. So now if I zoom in here a little bit more, we can see that we have the two channels, the left and right channel. We have this line in the middle here, which is our volume actually. So if I push this down or push this up, it's going to increase the volume. As you can see, that pop-up box appears every time I do that. So right now we're at 1.14 decibels. I can go below that or raise it up. But what's interesting about this as well is that we can actually hit Command or Control and click on this line. You can see that the cursor changes every time I am pressing down the Command key on my keyboard. And if I click on that line, it's going to create a keyframe. Then I can make another keyframe here in the beginning. And now if I drag this keyframe all the way down, you can see that it's created this dip in the line. And that's exactly what you think it is. It's the volume now fading up to this point and staying steady right there. So we can do the same thing for the beginning here. Create a keyframe, create another one at the end, and fade that out. Now, of course, you can also do that under the effects controls panel here with the volume section of that. And you can see that we pretty much have the same thing that we did in our timeline translated over onto our effects controls panel. So we can play with these keyframes, and you can see that it gets updated in real time right here in our timeline. So of course, you can play around with that, make it perfect, but you pretty much get the point of that. And the final step is color. You can add effects for color right here, like I showed you before with certain effects, or we can make our life easier and go under the color workspace right here on the top. It's going to change my panels up a little bit because now it knows that we're trying to color this. Now, since I'm dealing with log footage, meaning it's a flat color profile, I'm actually going to import a LUT. So I'm going to go under Basic, Correction, Input LUT, and I'm going to go under Browse, and I'm going to find that LUT, double click on it to import it, and now you can see that that's quite a dramatic change. Now this scene might be a little bit too dark in the shadows, so we can bring up the shadows just a little bit, and we can reintroduce a little bit of that contrast that we're losing. So all this is pretty self-explanatory. You know, we can bring down the highlights if we are clipping a little bit too much, maybe in the sky. You can adjust the white balance by warming things up or making things cooler. So this is pretty much all self-explanatory. Just play around with these settings, and that is essentially how you can very quickly move through your clips and adjust them. Now, one quick thing that I want to mention is instead of doing individual adjustments to all of these, what I want to do is I want to bring in an adjustment layer. So I'm going to go down here under my project panel, and I'm going to click on this icon to create an adjustment layer. And this is going to match my sequence settings, and that looks good. So I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to click and drag this out into my timeline, and I'm going to put it right above everything. I'm going to extend it all the way to the end of our little sequence here. And now if I click on this, I'm going to make those adjustments to this adjustment layer. And an adjustment layer essentially is an empty layer, an invisible layer that applies all of its effects to everything underneath it. The reason why this is convenient is because we want to apply the same sort of look to all of these clips. And instead of doing the same steps over and over, we can just do them once to our adjustment layer. So with our previous clip, I'm just going to go ahead and hit reset on that and click none on my input LUT so that we're back to where we started. I'm going to click on my adjustment layer, and now we're going to repeat those same steps that we did earlier. Maybe bring in the shadows again and the contrast. And now if I scroll through my next clips, you can see that that same color effect has been applied to all of these clips that are underneath this adjustment layer. So adjustment layers are something very, very powerful that you can use, and it can save you a lot of time, especially for long sections. Now, finally, if you want to add a little bit of text here in the end, you can click on your text tool, click directly into your program monitor, and type the end. And to change the font of this, you can go under the effects controls, and you can find all of those options in here. So we can change the font type to something maybe like that. Scale it up a little bit, you know, change different parameters and settings of that, and everything else is pretty similar to what you would see in Photoshop, After Effects, and any other software. So just play around with this, see what everything does. But with that being said, that is essentially a basic overview of Premiere, everything that you need to know. So now you know how to import things, get started on a project, bring in those clips and select parts of those clips to bring in your timeline, add effects to those clips, add sound effects, add an adjustment layer, applied some color stuff, and put some text in there. So that's a lot to unpack. Hopefully you found it useful. Hopefully you liked this video, and if you did, give it a like and share it with someone that needs some Premiere Pro knowledge. Now, I'm gonna stop talking in just a second, but don't click away just yet, because at the end of this video, I'm actually gonna leave a playlist to a bunch of other videos related to Premiere Pro so you can really master this program and make some really cool edits. You can also find that link in the description, where you can also find my Instagram at Kriscoart, and feel free to send me questions and check out the rest of the videos on my channel. Now, if you feel a little bit more confident and you wanna dive deeper into more advanced techniques inside of Premiere, I did just wrap an editing workshop that literally covers everything I know and that I apply into my own edits. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Chris Juni for Kriscoart, and I will see you next time.